Good evening, everyone. Happy Thursday. Happy Breeders' Cup Eve. We are super excited to have you join us for our big, Breeders' Cup Saturday show here. Uh, Obviously, you can see I'm hosting, so we had a little bit of a snafu. Our normal host is stuck in traffic somewhere between Chicago and Kentucky. Don't really know where. He may arrive at some point during the show. We really don't know. It's Josh. Let me bring Caleb in here. The panic texts and messages on Discord of sort of where Josh is and what's going on. There's more to the story, but I don't know how much we want to get into. I'm sure it's going to be quite entertaining when he does get here.
Josh is officially 2 for 2 now as far as going to Kentucky, hitting traffic, and showing up just massively late. So I don't know what the deal is. He tried to call and explain, but apparently he's stuck somewhere without service. So he will be here anywhere from 5 minutes from now to not at all, and I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, the best part of this whole thing is I think he explained he was having car issues yesterday. He then went this morning to deal with his car issues, bought a new car, is driving his new car to Kentucky. So when he was running late, I'm panicking like, oh, geez, did he have a problem with the new car? Is something going on? And now we're just awaiting for Josh to arrive in Kentucky, which is that's definitely a thing. But in his place, we have an epic fill-in who I don't know how long he's going to stay for, but the man, the myth, the legend, the one and only Writer Dave is here. He is all capped out for Saturday, so we figured we'd steal him for a bit. And Dave, what are you thinking of this Saturday card?
Hello from California. Hi. I love it. I'm excited for it. I'm usually totally wrong on Breeders' Cup. I have lots of great ideas and they never seem to pan out. I'm always boomed by some 30-1 that I didn't see coming, and then I get furious with myself for not covering it. We'll see. We'll see what happens. I like it. It's a good card.
That's par for the course of Breeders' Cup. It's just you're going to expect it's not sort of if a 31 to boot will boom you. It's which one and exactly when they will boom you. So, and I will want to I do want to say, because we have him on stream now, so I can see his face when I say this. I need a huge thank you to Writer Dave. He sent me this awesome shirt, which is the Always Bet on Bourbon shirt, which is amazingly cool. So figured I'd rock that today as we get into things. So I'm hopefully Caleb has got his mic situation sorted a little better here. What was that?
Is this any better or still poppy?
Oh, that's a ton better.
Okay. I just plugged in instead of going to Bluetooth. I figured that might be the problem.
Okay, so it's a Bluetooth issue. Yeah, that stuff happens. Well, cool. Yeah, no, that instantly cleared it up as soon as you started talking. So cool. So yeah, I don't know. Let's get into things and get rolling. I mean, why not? And let me see if I can figure out how to actually share. I'm sorry, guys. You're gonna have to deal with DRF PPs tonight. Josh with his Briz stuff that I don't know. Whoever uses his Briz PPs. I mean, they're just the worst.
How are we gonna find the E8s?
I know. This is the question. How do we find? We can all play the game of which horse does Josh pick. We can basically do his whole handicapping analysis by ourselves. So first off here, race 3 on Saturday, the G1 $1 million filly and mare sprint. Pretty solid field in here. I think the prohibitive morning line favorite is Goodnight Olive, the 8 horse, but Frank's Rocket, you're getting the return of CC. Pretty solid field in here. Caleb, what were you thinking here? Where'd you land?
Yeah, so I think this is a pretty cool race because I do think it's actually one of the more open races on the card. But for me, first off, we got news today that it sounds like Hot Peppers is going to scratch out of this race. She was not one that I was really considering using, but I think that she does play, or would have played, a huge element in the pace of how this race sets up. So even with Hot Peppers scratching out, I see a lot of speed in here. I see horses like, what was it, Wicked? No, I'm sorry, not Wicked. Echo Zulu, Lady Rocket. There was Hot Peppers, of course. You have the New Mexico horse Slammed, all that kind of need the lead. I think you have horses like Edgeway that like to be very upfront as well. I thought this race set up for an off the pace runner. Historically, this race has never been wired since its inception, and the pace setters have not done very well. So I actually landed on. I have kind of two horses that I landed on here, but I'll just kind of talk about one, and we'll circle back to the last. And it's a horse that I've actually hated for most of my life. Which this is one of those times where I thought I knew what I would pick until I handicapped the race, and then after handicapping it, I was like, "Wow, I can't believe I landed here." But I really actually kind of like Frank's Rocket in this race. And I can just see Steven cringing and rolling over in his grave right now. But she just seems like she got really good lately as a 5-year-old. She absolutely crushed a field at Charlestown, as she was expected to do. But really the race that I thought was super impressive was her honorable miss back at Saratoga on July 27th. She really did have a bad stumble at the break there. She kind of came out last, which is not really where she wants to be. Made a really nice move up the fence and looked every bit of a winner turning for home. Unfortunately, she'd get nailed late by Kamari, but if you think Kamari is a player in the sprint, up against the boys, I think you really have to like Frank's Rocket in this spot. So for me, I think that if she can avoid getting too close to the pace that I expect to be pretty hot, I think she could set a really nice trip, similar to what she showed at Saratoga, and might actually have kind of turned a new leaf, maybe got the hangs out of her system by finally crossing the wire first. And sometimes these horses that have a tendency to hang just need to get a winner to their belt, and they can sometimes fire back with another one. So she's one that I'm actually pretty interested in. 6-1, maybe not the best price I was hoping for, but I'm hoping she drifts a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think she makes a lot of sense in here. Dave, any solid opinions in here?
Yeah, I agree with Caleb on a lot of that. I think it's definitely going to be a hot pace. I'm not looking for anybody that's coming out and fighting for that lead. My big knock against Frank's Rocket, I like that Frank's is 5 years old, facing a bunch of 3-year-olds and a few older. The hanging thing is a bit of a problem, and that race against Kamari was only 4 horses total. So it's difficult to get too much form from a race with such a small field. I like the pick. I had Frank's as a B. I was also looking for horses that came off the pace. I'm a big CC fan. Every time CC races, I start finding myself landing on CC more often than not. Horse hasn't really done a lot wrong. There's a sort of win-loss pattern, but it's also, grade 1, grade 2, grade 1, grade 3, grade. So it's the connections are confident enough in CC and to keep entering into grade 1s. And the horse has done pretty well. He's made $2.5 million in his career, and seems to really, really come up with some solid runs. The key is to get close by the top of the stretch. When CC's further than the front at the top of the stretch, that horse has a tendency to sometimes, not quite be able to catch up. So I'll be curious the way that Victor rides her. And then another couple of horses that I liked, obviously Goodnight Olive, the morning line favorite, has done nothing wrong. Lost in an 11-horse field in her first race, and then just won everything since, and won convincingly. The horse is now 4 and is doing better than at 3, which is saying a lot. It's an all-around solid pick. But I agree with Caleb that this race is completely wide open, so I don't know that I'd weigh too heavily on the morning line favorite. I think you can find value. The horse that I found the most value in is the 11, Wicked Halo. Should also be coming from off the pace. Tyler Gaffalione knows his way around this track. The knock is it's a 3-year-old facing a lot older and better, but man, this horse is on the improve. And if you're looking for a horse that's finding her legs, I think this is a really good pick. Had a nice rest, came back and won solidly off that rest, is now firing back second off against a pretty tough field, but should get the right stalking trip from just off the pace. And I think Wicked Halo at 10-1 is a really solid bet.
Yeah, no, I can't fault any of that. Any of your take there, Dave, or Caleb, for that matter of fact. I did land on Goodnight Olive here, the favorite, as I often tend to do. She's been really, really good. After that maiden, she's been absolutely perfect. She's a very lightly raised 4-year-old. I don't really know what the issues were with her, and she also seems like a horse that, like, I don't feel like I've ever seen her run. She's odd in that, most of these I know this Naira scene. I know Chad Brown's horses. I know his barn, and it just feels like a horse that, like, I don't she just doesn't sort of get that hype. She is the betting favorite, or, well, the morning line favorite here, and I think she probably ends up being either the favorite or close to it. She doesn't need the lead. She does have enough tactical speed to keep herself out of trouble. If for some reason they do decide to put her on the lead, she can do that as well. So, I think she's a very versatile filly. Has gotten really, really good, and it did take Chad quite a while to sort of get her into graded stakes company, but her ballerina, this summer, and that was the one race I have seen of hers that she ran, was just amazingly visually impressive. She seems to be able. This is the question. Any of the sprint distances are seem to be good for her. So, yeah, I really, really like Goodnight Olive here, and I think with how I'm approaching this, she'll be my lone A on pretty much every ticket. But then again, you guys have mentioned a lot of the other horses that I think I'll have on sort of saver type tickets.
Yeah, my question with Goodnight Olive, and I'm not against her by any means. On any logical method of handicapping, she's a very likely winner of this race. But my questions with her are kind of, she's clearly a horse that's had some soundness issues, a lot of breaks in those running lines, and she just put together two pretty big races in a relatively short period of time, and is now coming back for her anyway, which is relatively short rest. I'm a little bit just concerned as far as how she responds to that for a horse that has had trouble staying on the racetrack. My other kind of question was just more from a racing flow perspective. She seems like one who's always been able to stalk pretty close with pretty clean trips against pretty moderate paces. I mean, she's never really been in a absolute blitzkrieg of a pace duel. She's had the advantage of getting nice stalking trips a length off of a pretty moderate pace. I don't think that's going to happen today, and I don't know how she's going to respond to that. If she's going to have to be either engaged in a pace duel, which I don't think she wants to do, or probably more like 3 to 5 lengths off the pace instead of a length or a length and a half like she's been recently. So those are kind of some unknowns to me. Is if she sits a little too close to that pace, does it sort of take away from her late kick? But I'm not really against her. I do think she's a very likely winner of this race. But just how many favorites do you want to take, and how short of a price do you want on her? Are really the questions for me.
Yeah, I think when I looked at her, she's in a. I'm okay with her being a single A and like a pick 5, but she's a horse I would never use in a tournament play. And I think there's different approaches depending on sort of what you're what you're doing in here. One question is, and I know we're probably going to get a lot of these. There is one Japanese horse in the entire Breeders' Cup this year. It's the 6 Chain of Love. Anybody give her a little bit of a look? I know in some of the people who are doing sort of morning work type stuff, they've said she's absolutely phenomenal in the morning. She looks just absolutely, looks to be very sort of ready to fire a big race, but she's 3 for 22 lifetime. So she's not a horse that really finds the winner's circle very often. And, on time form, she looks like she's a bit slow to kind of keep up with this company. But anyone think that she maybe has an outside chance of spoiling the party here?
So I loved this horse up until the scratch of Hot Peppers. Now she's the second horse I mentioned when I said like 2 horses in here other than Frank's Rocket. That kind of takes her from a love to a use, but maybe not quite as prominently, because I do think the pace kind of went from blistering to hot with the scratch of Hot Peppers. Chain of Love is a dead stone cold closer. The horse is going to be very far back early, quite possibly last, maybe with obligatory, taking up the rear. But this horse has a crazy late kick. I would encourage anyone to watch that last replay, because this horse is just motoring home in that last race. Came home in 35 seconds flat for the last 3 furlongs, just absolutely flying in a race where there wasn't a ton of passing going on. The problem I have with her is that she does need everything to go her way to get that set up that late kick. And that in her last race, and then both the races over at Saudi Arabia as well as Dubai, she never changed leads at all. And that's something that kind of bothers me for a horse like this. The mechanics aren't the prettiest. She stayed in her left lead the entire time in all 3 starts. She's a 5-year-old mare now with 22 races. It's something you would have liked to have seen been fixed by now. So that could cost her in a race like this. So some of the mechanics aren't pretty, but she was only beaten ahead by Dr. Scheibel in that Golden Shaheen back in March at Dubai. And I don't think he's a stud, but I think he's, a decent enough horse. And Switzerland is a decent enough horse that if any of them, were fillies or mares in this race, they would be contenders. So yeah, I think she's one that definitely fits in here, but definitely also needs the pace and the breaks to kind of go her way.
Yeah, the Dr. Scheibel pain that keeps running back to hurt me. So, God damn that horse. Anything else you were, as Stephen Fox says, Doctor Who. Anything else you thought interesting in here, Dave?
I mean, I think it'd be a disservice if we didn't talk about Echo Zulu coming from the parking lot. This horse was supposed to be the phenom, as a 2-year-old and now as a 3-year-old. We're not even mentioning her. I get that she's going to be close to the pace. She's won from off the pace in her maiden, or, just off, but still she wasn't in the front. I don't know. It's one of those, it's Breeders' Cup, and it's one of those things where weird stuff happens. And I know we don't necessarily love the jock, and the horse has disappointed us once. Why are we not talking about Echo Zulu?
Yeah, I mean, I think with Echo Zulu's Kentucky Oaks, they just went way too far, and they cut her back. But my sort of concern here is how she's been campaigned. That gigantic all summer layoff, to bring her back in the dogwood. Obviously, she ran well, in that race. But boy, that's a long layoff, and obviously something went wrong or something was up. Another one with that sort of spotty trading pattern, and I don't know. I mean, yeah, she's what champion. Champion 2-year-old comes back. I don't know why we're not talking about her, but I just, I don't know. I just think she's a cut below some of the others that are in here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not against her like aggressively. I'm more against her as the fact that I think she's going to be one of the shorter prices. And I think there's just other speed in here. I don't really want anybody on the lead, but I do think it's fair that we should talk about her because she was one of the top 2-year-old fillies and one of the most hyped up 3-year-old fillies coming into this year and getting to the right distance, coming off of a nice win. I mean, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all if she pulls off the win here.
Yeah, I think people are mentioning that she was a vet scratch on Belmont Day, or a gate scratch in the Acorn, and I don't know. Yeah, she was a vet scratch there, but there's still quite a bit of a time between May and September that you would have figured that there would have been a little more than just kind of one start in that gap. So, and I guess that's more what I was going for than anything else. Or I guess Belmont's technically in June. So, yeah. So no, you're probably right, Dave. I think she takes a fair bit of money off this morning line. I don't like the draw in the parking lot. She has to work a trip out, and I guess the other thing that I don't. This is one of those things that shouldn't matter in the Breeders' Cup, and it's one of those things that I should ignore, but I just can't. That in the last year, Ricardo Santana for Steve Asmussen is 0 for 57 at Keeneland. He has not had a winner for what used to be his top, the top barn he rode for, and in the Breeders' Cup, sometimes you disregard things like that, but man, I just can't get that one out of my head, and I guess that's the other reason that I sort of. Sometimes in these races, you're finding reasons to not like horses that definitely make sense and they fit. And I guess that was probably the reason I landed on. Cool. Anybody else?
That it makes sense.
Anybody else in here that we need to talk about, Dave, that I skimmed over?
I think that's great. That was a great
cool.
Summary.
Let's hop into race 4, the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. Gonna see a bunch of Euro invaders in here. Pretty interesting field. I think is Golden Pal will probably be your post time favorite, and I would imagine short of the morning line. The old, and I know Caleb gives me crap about this because I always try to beat Golden Pal in the United States, but bet Golden Pal overseas, which is the exact opposite of what you're supposed to do with Golden Pal. This horse has cost me more money than I really care to admit, but for a horse that just wins. But yeah, I mean, you're getting Golden Pal back here. I think if Golden Pal wins this, it would be the first ever 3-time, or what? I think definitely the first ever 3-time winner in this race, and I think one of only like 2 or 3 other 3-time Breeders' Cups winners in history. It's some sort of a crazy stat like that. So would put him in pretty rarefied air if he does win this. I don't know, let's start with Dave. What did you land on here? What were you thinking?
Golden Pal, lone A, lone B. Nobody's going to come close to this horse. This horse rockets out of the gate. It's going to find the front, and there's like, I don't. They've entered 15 other horses, including AEs. It could be 35 other horses. Nobody's going to get close to this horse.
Ice cold single. You need nobody else, huh?
Done. That's it.
Cool. Caleb, you agree with that?
I don't. I'm like you, Mark. I always bet against Golden Pal when he's most likely to win. So, so my kind of take is that I don't think Golden Pal is as good this year as he was last year. I mean, just watching his races visually, they haven't looked as good to me, with possibly the exception of the Shakertown. But the rest of his races have just not been that impressive. He was life or death to win the Troy at Saratoga this summer, and I know they tried rating him, but I'm not convinced that maybe True Valor just wasn't a little bit quicker than him that day. So I don't know what happened, and he was very had to work very hard to get up there. Clearly, the plan is going to be to send him to the lead here. I don't think they're going to try anything crazy. But, so horses like this, it reminds me of Gamine a little bit, where I kind of thought she wasn't as good the second year in the Breeders' Cup as she was her first year, but she kept finding fields that were just bad enough that nobody could beat her anyway. Like, I sort of feel that way about Golden Pal, is that he's not as good as he was. He's still very good, but he's just found some fields that are not very good. However, I think this year there is a horse in here that is just as good, if not better than him. And that's the European Invader number 6, Highland Princess. I think she has been just an absolute sensation in her last few starts. She has time form figs that are every bit as good, if not better, than what Golden Pal has done. She's proven around a bend. She's proven over firm turf. She's drawn very well. She has speed, but it's certainly not need the lead here. And some of the form she comes in with is she's just so sharp right now. So I get it. There's questions about taking Europeans in a turf sprint, especially 5.5 at Keeneland, which is Golden Pal's backyard. But last time we saw 5.5 at Keeneland, we saw Glass Slippers pull off the big upset in the Breeders' Cup 2 years ago. Yep. So I think Highland Princess is probably a better horse. If this was in Europe, I think she would beat Golden Pal by 15 lengths. Since it's in Kentucky, I'm going to say she probably beats him by a length, maybe. But that's my pick here.
Yeah, I ended up in the same top horse as Caleb. So, Dave, congrats on Golden Pal winning the Breeders' Cup sprint.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
But no, I mean, I agree with for all the same reasons. I was there for that Troy, and I was sitting there screaming down the front stretch, "Oh my God, he's gonna get beat!" Finally, like, I bet against him. I was finally right. It finally is gonna happen, and I'm gonna be here in the person to see it. And then he kind of came back. So it didn't quite happen. I think Highfield Princess is. I agree with Caleb. Arguably, if you're a time form person, Highfield Princess has better time form figs than Golden Pal in a couple of races. I think you get Golden Pal. I think goes off at 3 to 5, and I think you actually get a little value on Highfield Princess. And I don't know what that is, if that's 5 to 1 range, but that's definitely all I need to get behind Highfield Princess. And the other thing that is a little bit interesting, and I know Golden Pal has won on soft going before, but I don't necessarily know if he's as good on softer going. And I was reading a couple reports today, and they were saying there's actually a fair bit of water still in the Keeneland turf course, and that they were thinking that it might lean a little more towards some of the Europeans that are maybe a little more proven over that footing. So I guess I'm going to hope that Golden Pal breaks, realizes he's around a bunch of European horses, thinks he's back in Europe, and does the just not win thing that he does when he's there, and I can get Highfield Princess in here at a bit of a price. And honestly, I'll tell you, I have Highfield Princess and Golden Pal as my 2 A's, and I have absolutely nobody else in this race that I will be using probably in anything horizontally. There's some other horses that if I squint hard enough, I can get to, but I have to squint really hard. And do we really want to talk through any of those?
From the win side, I don't think you need to. So I don't think we should spend a ton of time here before Steven gets mad at us. But I'll quickly say that there's two horses I'm going to try to get underneath. One of those is Emirati Anna, who is the number 3 horse. This horse has kind of ugly form, but I think has improved every start since coming back from Dubai, and wasn't beaten all that badly by Minzal last time out, who is a pretty nice turf sprinter in his own rights. So I don't think this horse could win, but I think this horse is improving and could get a piece of this. The other one is to the far outside, which is Cazadero. This horse has been a different animal since switching into the turf and onto the Brendan Walsh barn. Just has a devastating kick. I mean, this horse comes so fast late. I don't know that he can win, especially with that draw. But I think that if it gets a little bit hot up front, and even if it doesn't, I just really like this horse's chances to come running late and grab a piece of this.
Yeah, I think those were two that I was on. I tried really, really hard to make a case for Go Bears Go in here, who is a horse that I think, a year or two ago, we thought Go Bears Go was going to be an absolute force and was going to be, a monster. Probably hasn't quite lived up to that billing. His Phoenix Stakes win was pretty nice, but that was definitely a softer field there. Huge price and a horse that maybe I want to sort of clunk up a trifecta or a superfecta at 30-1 and make those really pay for me. So that was the one other that I had that I wanted to talk about. Dave's just sitting over there smiling pretty, going, yep, I got nobody else. I'm good.
No. I think Campanelle has a really good shot at hitting the board. The horse is wickedly fast on a close. Not the best at Keeneland, but has faced some pretty tough crowds and always huge fields, and always seems to show up in the money. And the other one is Bran, also coming from the parking lot. Bran's deceivingly fast, and I'm curious to see what's going to happen at the end of the race, because I think Bran's going to be there.
I would love Bran if this was 6 furlongs, but I think the 5.5 at Keeneland might be a little sharp. But I agree with you. I think he's a very nice turf sprinter.
And the one and only Benjamin Willicke is in chat saying that the Casa Creed disrespect is out of control, and that we we do need to talk about Casa Creed. And what I would tell Ben is, if this was the turf mile or a 7 furlong turf sprint, I'd probably be pretty darn interested in Casa Creed, but it's not. So I'm not.
Yeah, I'm glad he's not in the mile. I don't think that's the right spot for him, but there is no right spot for those 6 to 7 furlong turf sprinters, unfortunately. Yeah. So I don't think this is really where he's going to be at his best.
Cool. I think we covered some nice prices underneath that, and I would say I think this is one of those races that if you get a little cute, you can definitely structure some. I think the try or the super might really pay here. So I think it's one of those ones. If you're a little creative, you can get some pretty cool prices here. So let's get next. The Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. Boy, I will say that of the entire sequence on Saturday, I think the morning lines are the worst here of any race. They have. Is it Cody's Wish as your 5-2 morning line favorite? I realize Cody's Wish is won 3 in a row and is 5 for 5 at the distance. Like, I get all the accolades, but I don't think I'll end up having Cody's Wish on a single ticket because I just don't think he's fast enough. I don't know if I necessarily want to throw out who I'm going to have on my ticket because Caleb's going to give me crap about using 4 A's. But beyond that, does anybody who's a little sharper at narrowing it down than me have an opinion on anybody in here?
Go ahead, Dave.
Nah, this race is confounding. I have no idea. This is the one race that I'm still completely baffled on. So I'm hoping to learn from you guys tonight because I think the Baffert horse, Laurel River, is really dangerous in here. And everybody always seems shocked when Baffert wins on big days. And they're like, why didn't we see that coming? It's Bob Baffert. And sort of, okay, next year I'm going to remember Baffert, Breeders' Cup. And then Baffert wins, and you're like, I didn't bet Baffert again because there's so many other great horses.
I agree with you, Dave. That's my top pick in here, actually, is Laurel River. This horse has been really good. Really good specifically at a 2-turn mile, which is what he had at Del Mar in those 2 wins. And I think that's kind of a different thing you have to look at. Mark kind of highlighted that Cody's Wish is 5 for 5 at a mile, which is true. But all of those wins are at a 1-turn mile. He's actually 0 for 2 trying anything around 2 turns. So, I mean, is that really a difference maker or not? I don't know. But to me, it's something to consider when you're looking at a horse that's the morning line favorite. And I don't know if he goes off as the favorite, but it's certainly going to be one of the top betting choices in the race. So for me, I like Laurel River. I think he's very versatile. He can be forwardly placed. He can come off the pace a little bit if he needs to. I thought that last race in the Pat O'Brien, I didn't really think it looked strong initially, but it actually turned out to be a pretty strong race. So we saw Senior Buscador, who ran, I think, third in that race. We saw him come back to win next time out in the ACAC at Churchill. Speaker's Corner was in that race, who is clearly out of form right now, but was for a long time thought to be the best miler in the country. The Chosen Brawn came out of that to repeat with 2 wins in Calbred Stakes races. And then Defunded came out of that race to run first in the Awesome Again. If you scroll down far enough, you could even see CZ Rocket, who just missed by a nose in a second place finish last time out to How Be It. So I thought that was actually a very salty race, despite the fact it looked a little questionable going in. And I just think this is the kind of the horse of now. I mean, some of those other horses, I'm not so sure about. I don't know if they like the 2 turns. I don't know if they like the distance. I don't know where they're going to be on the pace. But Laurel River is the one I have the least questions about, and he'd be my top pick in here.
Yeah, so my top pick in here, and I talk about me always eating chalk, is actually one of the pricier horses in the field, and I realize he hasn't won in for absolutely ever, but that's Simplification. If you are looking at, if you're a time form person, some of his time form figs are absolutely, match up very well. I think his last out time form in that Pennsylvania Derby was faster than anybody else has run in this field. And he's also perfect at a mile. He won the Mucho Macho Man at Gulfstream Park. And then they've spent forever trying to stretch him out and turn him into a 1 1/8 or a classic distance horse. And they're finally now cutting him back to a mile, which I think is what he really wants to be doing all along. And they're putting Sayas up, who I think is going to get him an aggressive ride from the rail. I don't think he'll be on the lead, but I think he'll probably sit just behind. And I think that's the trip that you want to have at Keeneland. And I really like Simplification in this spot to have a massive upset potential at a bit of a price. I think that's a terrible morning line. I don't think I even get half of that, and I realize he hasn't won in quite a while, but he hasn't won since the Fountain of the Youth in March. But this is a horse that maybe they're hopefully finally figuring out what he really wants to be doing. So he was actually my top pick in here. I thought Law Professor, who is also another massive price in here, made a fair bit of sense. Another one of those horses that if you look at his mile races, form improves pretty substantially. And then I think somebody like Gunite in here makes a ton of sense as well, who is a horse that has a wind going 7 furlongs over this surface, stretching out to the mile here, which I don't think he'll have any issue with with going out to a mile. And the other horse I thought, and I know a couple people have talked about this in chat, is Cyberknife. I think Cyberknife in this spot is another horse that he's obviously very talented. He got a 1 1/8 in the Haskell, and I don't know why him with a little bit of a cutback here doesn't move him up, and he can't also be another one that's runs a monster effort with and I don't really think he needs too much speed improvement here. So like I said, I have 4 A's. I'm not going to play a ticket with 4 A's on it. I will clean that up a little bit, but I think as you're hearing this, we obviously kind of all agree this is a pretty wide open affair.
Yeah, the other horses you mentioned were all really, really high on my list, except Simplification. And the big reason is, and this isn't necessarily fair to the horse, but the trainer Antonio Sano just doesn't ship well. He's 3% or 6% shipper out of 115 starts, and 3% win at graded stakes out of 34 starts. This just isn't really his forte. It's sort of above his pay grade. So the horse is fantastic, fast, whatever. And the horse doesn't know that his trainer can't win at this level, but the trainer can't win at this level. So I'm curious if this will be the time that he does.
Yeah, I've seen a decent bit of. Go ahead, Mark. Sorry.
No. Go ahead, Caleb.
Okay, I've seen a decent bit of simplification love on Twitter. I know a friend of the show, Matthew DeSantis, is a big fan of this horse, but yeah, I'm in Camp Dave on this one. Not so much the shipping angle. I think that's super valid though. I don't believe the horse has improved. If you're just looking at his time form figures, then he's improved in every start since February. But if you look at his results, that doesn't seem to jive. Sometimes I think time form can be a victim of giving good figs to horses that run mediocre races in stakes. And I also think the Pennsylvania Derby comes up too fast every single year. So I don't believe the figures. So that's kind of my knock on him, is that I don't think he's improved at all since spring. And he kind of runs the same race every time. I do like the cutback. I will agree with you there. And I do like your other picks, Mark, with Law Professor. I think he's really interesting in here. I don't think you get anything near 20-1, but I think he's very interesting. Gun Knight's a wild card. I don't like him at 7-2, but I do think he could certainly win the race. Cyber Knife's not for me. That horse can't win this race. But
Cyber Knife could win no race ever.
No.
Nick Feldman making me feel like an idiot and mentioning that Andy Serling also likes simplification.
Oh.
So I will be changing my top pick in this race.
That's now. Yep, that's it.
Oh, the kiss of death.
That is absolutely the kiss of death when Andy Serling likes your horse. And I guess my real question, I probably should have started this off with, but what's the pace complexion look like in this race? I mean, it looks like there is just I have no idea.
Slow down.
I mean,
Andy's
it's
gonna
messy,
go to the
right?
front. Yeah. Slow down.
Pipeline's no slouch.
Yeah, that's fair.
But I think it's one of those two, right?
Slow down, Andy.
In that turf race?
Yeah.
Yeah, he got me in that race too. I remember that very clearly. But honestly, though, for that exact reason, I have both Slow Down Andy and Pipeline as B's on my pick 5, for example.
Yeah.
Especially Slow Down Andy, because he's going to be a monster price. And he stumbled, kind of rushed up, and got a little bit rank. I don't know that he was ever going to beat Defunded, but I do think he would have held for second had he not stumbled out of the gate. And that's probably going a little bit farther than I think is best for him. So I actually like him with the inside draw with the likely early speed. I like him a lot. Pipeline is the other horse that I'll use because he could be your other leader. I'm a little bit less sure about just how good he is, or if he really wants to go 2 turns. I think he might be more of a 1-turn miler or 7 furlong kind of horse, but he is one that, if Slow Down Andy stumbles again, he could find himself alone out there, and he's one that I won't want to be.
Yeah, and I think somebody was asking about tomorrow. Does he have like a 30-1 morning line ceiling or something? I think I don't know how he comes up with his morning lines, but I'm assuming it involves a dartboard and a blindfold, because none of these lines make any sense whatsoever. And I mean, this race to me is the worst on of the day, but you can make the same argument for a lot of these. His morning lines are just absolutely laughable. And again, as horse players, people who do a lot of this, we probably shouldn't be staring at morning lines, but it's a good, I guess you get a little spoiled at certain tracks, specifically the Naira scene, where you have an understanding of where the public money is going to kind of go. So, so you can have an understanding, oh, geez, I'm getting value here. And it makes it really hard to figure out what kind of value I'm getting for the risk I'm taking when I look at a race like this where the lines are all over the place. And I know Cody's Wish is the morning line favorite. Anybody have any interest in Cody's Wish in here? Is a horse that likes to get his photo taken, very good at the distance. I figured my hot take of him just not being fast enough was going to light somebody up, but no.
I mean, he's fast enough to win this race. I don't think it's fair to say he's not fast enough. But I do think 2 turns is maybe not where he's best at, given what we've seen so far. And I think he's probably going to be farther back than I think you can really be. This 1 mile configuration on the dirt at Keeneland, it's a very quick run to the first turn, and it's a very quick one to the first finish line. So you really have to make that move into the turn and then lose ground if you want to have any chance. Even when the pace is very fast, we typically see the pace hold together at this strip just due to the way the track plays. So I just think he's going to be a little too far back, and I don't think he's quite that good or going to have that much kick left going around the second turn to pull off the upset. And I also think he's going to get, I call it an upset, but in my mind it would be an upset. But I think he's going to get overbet based on the fact he beat Jackie's Warrior last out, and everybody's going to see that.
Yeah, I think Nick Feldman asking the important question there, which is that sort of if Jackie's Warrior wins by geared down by 5 or 6, do you upgrade Cody? yeah, you probably do, right? Like, I think you
That's
have
the
to.
wrong order,
So.
though. I guess if Cody wins by 5, you upgrade Jackie. I mean,
Or yeah. I guess that would be it. Yeah, because Jackie does run later. But
I don't know that I really factor my opinion of Jackie based on what Cody's wish does, but I see what you're asking.
yeah. Anybody else have anything in this one? By the way, we are getting updates on Josh. He is currently planning on sleeping in his car in the middle of a traffic jam on some interstate somewhere. But everybody's apparently turned their car off at this point. So yeah,
He's had a rough
it's
couple of days. Poor Josh.
he's been a rough couple of days.
Yes, he really has.
Oh, okay. Let's flip on to the 6th here. And by the way, we did say that we were giving away some merch. I am not sure how we're going to be doing that because Josh was in charge of it and he didn't share details. So we'll figure something out, and we'll make sure some free merch gets out to some of our loyal listeners. So race 6, the Philly and Mare Turf. I sort of really love this race, and I thought it was a really, really, really sort of fun one. I don't know when you guys want to. I mean, obviously you have Nashua, who's going to be your, should probably end up going off your morning line favorite. Euros have historically done very well in this race. Nashua has been an absolute monster. Where did you guys sort of land here?
For me, I kind of looked at this race as an Italian plus Euros. I respect an Italian too much to not use her. She's just been on an absolute tear in her last couple of starts. I do get the impression that a mile and 3/16 is probably the absolute limit of what she wants to do distance-wise. But she did have a nice run going a mile and an eighth, 2 back in the Diana, blasted a field of mostly her stablemates, as is the standard for New York turf racing. And I'm also not too sure that anyone can go with her. I know there's going to Vegas in this race, but it's hard to think that the plan for Rispoli is going to be to duel. So I expect an Italian. Beyond that, I have no interest in the rest of the American runners. And I actually have a hard time separating the top 3 European runners between Nashua, Above the Curve, and Tuesday. I guess of the 3, I would prefer Nashua. Unfortunately, she's the shortest price. But I do think she's probably the best filly in this race at this trip and at this specific configuration. She did lose to Tuesday in the Epsom Oaks, but that was at a mile and a half. And I think she's just not really as good at 12 furlongs as she is at 10. Conversely, I kind of think Tuesday's better at 12 furlongs than she is at 10. So I think that Nashua's probably just, this trip just seems to fit her a little bit more. I think both of those fillies, Nashua and Tuesday, get moved up by firmer ground. So I don't think either of them showed their best over the soft turf that we saw in the Prix de l'Opera last time out. So I think that Nashua and Tuesday are going to improve on a little bit quicker ground. Above the Curve to me is a bit of a wild card. I don't know how she's going to handle quick ground. She was only beaten a nostril last time to Nashua, who certainly fits in here. But you don't really get a local jockey. I mean, you don't get a local European jockey. I mean, I know Johnny Velasquez does ride for Joseph O'Brien pretty frequently, so maybe not the end of the world, but this is one that I don't have a good feel for. She could certainly win. I don't know that I'd really want to let her beat me at 9-2 or 5-1, but it's also hard for me to go in here and make a strong case for why I think she's the horse to beat.
Yeah, I sort of saw this race the same as Caleb. I ended up on Nashua, and I think I know. Yeah, or I think who was it? I think it was Nick Feldman was saying in chat, that sort of you have an Italian with a chance to wire. I think an Italian makes a ton of sense. I think Nashua is the other sort of Euro that I want. I have one price play that I do like in here, but I'll let Dave go before I get to my price play.
So European horses aren't my forte. Breeders' Cup is always a bit of a challenge, the grass races. This year I'm leaning on, there was a great podcast that our friend Chase Essems did on Notorious OTB with Malcolm Banford, and he loves Nashua, was raving about Nashua. The horse travels well, is just, blah, 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 just perfect. So I'm using Nashua as a lone A. I'm using Above the Curve as a lone B. I'm just going off the confidence of an expert.
No, I respect that. I respect that. The one horse, and Caleb's going to now eye roll at me, which will be fun, that I do sort of like, and I know a couple of very sharp people who are in the industry who also do sort of like her in this spot is Moira, the 12. You know, she had trouble in that EP Taylor. She was not where she was supposed to be. She was way more forwardly placed early on than she normally is. And she got nailed or tracked down by Rozier late. And then obviously the whole disqualification because of the whole, poor ride and everything else. I've always thought that she would be a horse that if they ever got her onto turf, she would be, an absolute monster. Obviously, she won the Queen's Plate. She won the Woodbine Oaks. Philly taking on the boys. She had, no problem there. Gets a little bit of protection here, dropping back into the Philly restricted races. And I think at 10-1, she's a very, very interesting sort of outsider. I can understand the argument for people to say, hey, I want no part of her. A lot of these Woodbine horses do have a hard time taking their show on the road. That's historically been a thing, and she's just sort of a Woodbine specialist. And I respect that argument. But I also think that EP Taylor last out with a couple of asterisks for an absolutely brutal trip is good enough to put her into, she needs to improve off that effort to be a major player here. But I think given the trip that there's some, ability that she could improve a little here.
And look at those works. I mean, she just drilled a 58 flat 5 furlong bullet. I mean, this horse is primed, ready to go.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, Woodbine works notoriously quick. But as far as Moira goes, I watched that race a few times because I've seen a few other people like Ed DeRosa and others just all in on this horse. And, for context, Ed DeRosa was all in on Tiz the Bomb in the Kentucky Derby. But anyway, I like Ed. That's a joke. But Moira, I watched the race back, and to me, if I want anybody out of that race, it's the winner, Rozier.
Rozier, yeah.
Moira fouled Rozier. I mean, maybe it wasn't a foul that we were going to take her down for, but Rozier kind of made a stupid move trying to shoot a hole. Moira was all over the track and cut her off. Rozier checks back to last. Meanwhile, Moira then ducks to the inside and almost unseats another rider, while Rozier re-rallies from dead last up the outside to actually get up again. I don't think Rozier is very good. I've seen enough of Rozier stateside to pretty much have my opinion of her fairly well solidified. And the fact that she was able to beat that field with that trip tells me that kind of what she was facing in there is not very good. So I don't really want any runner in there. Watching that race, if I had to pick one, given the connections, the price, and everything else, I would much rather have Rozier. So I don't get the Moira love, but I will respect our fellow Canadians for sticking to their guns.
Yeah, no, my take was I already think I know who Rozier is, and maybe there's still upside to Moira. And I guess I understand, and I can understand your take on who got the worst of all the, horrible trippage that happened there. Anybody else in here we need to talk about, Caleb?
There's one horse I have on kind of on my list is a C or maybe underneath of the exact kind of horse. I haven't decided what, and that's the 6. Mise-en-scène. I don't know how you say it. But
Mise-en-scène.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Dave.
Mise-en-scène.
Mise-en-scène. Okay, you just sounded pretty confident, so I'm going to go with that. This is a filly that the only reason I'm kind of throwing her in is because I think she really subtly improved last time out with the stretch out. She's been kind of campaigned exclusively at a mile for most of her career. They put her at a mile and a quarter. She raced pretty clear near the lead. Pretty much looked like she had nothing left with about 2 or 3 furlongs to go, and then continued to rally, continued to fight, and nearly re-rallied up the fence for the win. Just missed. And I tend to think that, that stretch out with maybe a slightly more patient ride, I don't expect her to be on or near the lead in this race, but maybe kind of be the difference maker. She might just be a little bit better going a little bit longer. Now, she has to find a lot of, points here to catch up to a horse like Nashua or an Italian or, Tuesday or Above the Curve, but she's going to be a huge price. And I do think she's one that has subtly improved on the stretch out and is probably likely to get pretty overlooked.
Yeah, no, I have a lot of respect for that. And I also wonder, this might be a horse that handles kind of relishes the good going, the firmer going in the United States. We've seen a lot of this where certain horses are sent over because they will handle the ground, and a lot of times they take a step forward. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if she does that here. Anybody else want to touch? Are we good here? Perfect.
Good.
Let's head on to race 7, the Breeders' Cup Sprint. Yeah, I mean, you are getting getting the Jackie's Warrior show. And I guess the game, here is there anybody in this field that can beat Jackie's Warrior? I mean, that's really, I think, the game you're playing. Like obviously as handicappers, we're always trying to beat the Jackie's Warriors of the world, but you guys, is Jackie's Warrior a lone single here?
Not for me.
Not for me either.
Yeah, I have the same take. So let's let Dave go first. Dave, where'd you land here?
Well, so obviously last, the Breeders' Cup Sprint, was it the Breeders' Cup Sprint last year that she lost by a lot?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
6th. Came in 6th, the Keeneland. So obviously, I don't know if it's the course. I don't know if it's the race. I don't know if it's because I had a lot of money going through that horse, but for whatever reason, the horse completely failed. So I'm not going to single this year. I think American Theorem, the 4 horse, makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I know you probably don't want a deep closer, but I don't know that Joe's going to stay that far off the front. Typically, he's pretty close to the front by the time they get to the top of the stretch. Just a really impressive all-around horse, and at 10-1, and probably higher come, the gates open. I think it's worth a bet. Really good works leading into this, improving as a 5-year-old. Toss the all-weather race, and you got some really competitive numbers. The other horse I really like in here is Aloha West, the 5. Doesn't jump off the page necessarily, but when the horse fires, the horse really fires. And so if you're looking for somebody to come close when Jackie doesn't perform, those would be the 2 for me, the 4 and the 5.
Caleb, what were you thinking in here?
So yeah, I agree with the direction Dave is going. I don't trust Jackie's Warrior. The only horse that can beat Jackie's Warrior is probably Jackie's Warrior. But that's what happened last year. I mean, I thought Jackie's Warrior was the most likely winner of the entire weekend last year.
Yeah.
Lone speed, a huge figure advantage over the field, and just absolutely did not show up. And the same thing happened. You could argue that this horse just tails off toward the end of the season, because he looked like an absolute dominant 2-year-old before he ran a stinker in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Classic. Yeah, that was 2 turns. Maybe it was too far. Okay. There's no excuse for what he did last year in the Breeders' Cup Sprint. I mean, he was supposed to win that race. And again, last time out in the 4-go, you're supposed to win that race. Unless you think Cody's Wish is all of a sudden the best sprinter in the country. When you're 1-5, you're supposed to win that race on a loose lead with pretty moderate fractions. I don't know what's up with this horse. He's very inconsistent. On his day, he's the best sprinter in the country, bar none. But I don't know when his day is going to be. And you just can't trust a horse like that at heavy odds-on favoritism. So I kind of went away from Jackie's Warrior as well. I used, I think the number 2 Kamari makes a ton of sense. I think that the filly taking on the boys here, the mare taking on the boys rather. She tends to run really good races lately, and she tends to run those races that are in races that have a little bit of a slower pace. It seems like she's not one of those drop back and make one big run kind of horses. But when the pace is on the more moderate side and she can stick a little bit closer, she's looked really good in her last 2. And her last 2 figures are every bit fast enough to win this race. So I like Kamari in here. I do think the pace is going to be on the more moderate side. The only horse I think that could probably go with Jackie's Warrior is Hector Barrios' horse, number 7, Super Ocho. I don't give that horse much of a chance in here, but I think he could at least do enough to soften up Jackie's Warrior, similar to Pipeline last time in the 4-go. So I like Kamari as my top pick in here. I think that's pretty certainly the horse that I'm going to try the most to beat Jackie's Warrior with. I respect Dave's pick of Theorem. That horse will be on my ticket as well. And the other horse I would use is Elite Power. This horse has kind of beaten a bunch of nobodies, but is quietly strung together 4 really nice, absolute dominant wins, beating nobodies the way that you would hope a good horse beats nobodies. So probably needs to find a little bit more improvement to really land a blow here. But I do think this is a horse that could be the horse of now, whereas perhaps Jackie's Warrior is the horse of last year.
Yeah, I agree with Caleb here. I like Kamari quite a bit in this spot, which, by the way, if I like Kamari, you want to fade Kamari, just letting you know, because another horse that I am consistently on the wrong side of. Jackie's Warrior makes a lot of sense in here, but nobody's actually talked about my top pick. And again, I realize this is a little bit of a tournament style pick, but that's Elite Power on the 6. I realize if you look at speed figures, he's never run a speed figure that is fast enough to win this race. And I know a wise man once told me that horses run their own race, and that, just because they won by 10, that they wouldn't have run a faster speed figure if they, had competition. But if you look at Elite Power's last 4, he's won by absolute open lengths. Won by 9, won by 3.25, 3.5, and then 5.75. He's just absolutely destroyed the last 4 fields he's been in. Seems to be a horse that's on the rise. Bill Mott seems to have him really peaking at the right time. He seems to be getting better. And this is, again, I don't really know if we've seen the best out of Elite Power. I think this is a horse that if he runs, 10 or 12 points faster on time for him in this race, it wouldn't shock me at all, because I don't really know what's there. We don't know what the what's left in the tank on this one. I hope I can get somewhere around that 6-1 sort of range. Wouldn't actually, if Jackie's Warrior took a ton of money and he gets a little lost on the board, wouldn't hurt my feelings at all. But I really like Elite Power in this spot. And it's a horse that I want to make sure I have enough coverage going through that that I don't get don't want to get boomed by a horse I like quite a lot.
I got one more long shot I want to talk about. The outside horse Flash of Mischief at 30-1. It's Breeders' Cup. Weird stuff happens. If Jackie somehow fumbles again, this horse has been running at racetracks I don't even know the names of, but has somehow strung together almost $250,000 in purses. 30-1. I'm gonna have a ticket with this horse on there.
I actually have that horse.
If Carl Broberg wins a Breeders' Cup race, I will be dead on every ticket, but so happy. Just for the memes.
I will say, when I cap this race, I have Flash of Mischief marked down as a B type. First thing, Dave, I think that morning line is terrible. I think that horse, again, I think that's a bad morning line. Now, I think you're going to get half that, but even if you get half that morning line, if that horse, this race is, I realize, Whitmore had a ton of back class. I don't know if Flash of Mischief necessarily does, but this is a race that's produced some big priced upsets in the, previous years, when a very short priced favorite doesn't fire their A game. So I don't hate that at all.
Yeah, you could throw a pick 3 or something through that horse, and, it'd be a $2,000 pick 3 if you get it right.
Yeah, it's probably $2,000 pick 3 if favorites win the race before and the race after, kind of a thing. Like you're going to get absolutely paid if it does. So, And I'm getting a lot of flack in one of our chats about the fact that I'm trusting Remy, Canterbury, Prairie Meadows, Lone Star,
I get it.
Delta.
It's Breeders' Cup, man.
FanDuel Park, Saratoga figures. So yeah.
Thursday night special.
Yeah. So, anybody else we need to talk about in here that we haven't covered? I do think this is a pretty wide open betting affair. If you get past the favorite, I think it becomes a pretty wide open race, and it's a pretty interesting one. So
I think somebody asked, Murphy actually asked about CZ Rocket.
Did he? I'm sorry. Sorry, Greg, I missed it.
Yeah. Boy, if CZ Rocket wins, I'll be very sad. I'll be the opposite reaction of as if Flash of Mischief wins. That would be very sad for the sport if CZ Rocket wins this race. No, I don't think he can win. I don't know where the last race came from. He looked like he was pretty much washed. And even the last race, he kind of couldn't get the job done. So, not for me, but it's Peter Miller juice, and this horse has boomed me on races I didn't think he could win before.
Yeah, but tail end of his 8-year-old season, how much more are they going to get out of CZ Rocket?
Yeah, his best days are behind him, it seems.
Yeah, that's sort of my take. I'll let the 8-year-old beat me. And if he beats me, then it'll be an ugly scene. So, I've seen crazier horses, let's put it that way. But and he does tend to fire his A game at Keeneland, which is, does say something. So let's hop on to the next. We're into the Breeders' Cup Mile. This race is absolute insanity. I think Modern Games probably ends up being your post-time favorite. Um, I know Charlie Appleby, in a couple interviews I've seen, is exceedingly high on Modern Games, and was almost making it out to be a foregone conclusion that he wins this race. But I think if Modern Games has any little bit of trouble in his trip, this is a crazy, absolutely wide open affair. So, wondering how you guys went. What were you thinking in here?
Yeah, so for me, there's a lot of really smart people, including a lot of European analysts, who are like, "This race is wide open. I wouldn't lean on either Modern Games or Kinross. Annapolis looks really nice." He's like, "I think they're all wrong. I think you're all wrong. I think your redcoats don't know what you're talking about. I think Modern Games wins this race by as many as he wants. I just think I think he's very much the best. And not only do I think he's the best horse in the race, but I think he's the best suited for this kind of a race. He just thrives on American racing with the two turns, the tighter turns, the quicker ground. I mean, what he did at Woodbine, if he runs 85% of that race back, the rest of the field is playing for second. So, yeah, he didn't win the Queen Elizabeth last time. I don't think I do take that as a negative because it does feel like he should have ran better. But he's never been a horse that does his best work over soft ground, and that was an absolute swamp that day. He just couldn't get his feet out of the ground. It seemed kind of got stuck in motion. He still grinded away for second and losing to a horse that just really relishes the sloppy, soggy going. So I think that Modern Games to me is just tons the horse to beat in here, and will be a single A and arguably single B for me. There are others in here that I think are worth talking about, but I'm sure the rest of y'all cover that. So for me, Modern Games is the horse.
Where'd you land in here, Dave, or do you want me to go first?
Yeah, no, I landed on the same as Caleb. I think it's almost a foregone conclusion. I'm against Kinross strongly because of what Malcolm Bamford was saying on Chase's podcast. He was saying to fade that horse, so I will. The other horses I thought were interesting in here was Order Australia, Annapolis, and then the 4 horse, I think. The 3 horse.
4 is Modern Games.
Yeah.
3
Dream
is Dream
Loper.
Loper. Yep.
Those are the ones I was most interested in, but I agree with Caleb. I think Modern Games is worlds the best in this one. Domestic spending is really the big question mark. What happens when domestic spending comes back in?
Yeah, so when I sort of capped this race on first pass, I was just like, "Oh, Modern Games wins this in a laugher. This is just a super simple race. Why am I overthinking this?" I keep coming back and adding more horses, and now I think I have half the field that I want coverage to, which is kind of how I do things. So if my gut's right, Modern Games wins. I agree with Caleb, but I tend to wanna, I think maybe it's still a little Order of Australia hangover where I remember getting boomed by that horse and having 80% of the field and still getting blown away by a 60-1 that draws down on the AE list and blows up my pick 6. So, I thought 2 other horses beyond that were somewhat interesting. My top pick in here is going to be Kinross. I know Dave's hard against this horse on, on some info that he has from I think it was from one of Chase's experts. I ended up on Kinross because he's won 4 in a row. I don't think he has any any issues stretching out at this point in his career to a mile. I think he'll handle it fine. And he's just been really, really, really good with the horses that he's been, beating. He's been actually beating some real quality horses and making it look pretty darn easy the last few. So I realize the post is sort of the concern here. He's obviously drawn way outside. Frankie has to, invent a trip for him. But I thought Kinross makes quite a bit of sense in here. And the other horse, and I know there's some eye rolls out of Caleb for this, but I do sort of like Smooth Like Straight in here a bit. Oh, there it is. I get it from Dave. I'm getting crap from Dave. Oh man, I realized Smooth Like Straight.
Even Dave's not taking the California horse.
I know. I realized Smooth Like Straight hasn't won in absolutely forever. And that he's apparently, as a 5-year-old, developed the world's worst case of the hangs. He fits here, and his time form speed figs say he fits. He's a horse that has some early foot. He may end up on the lead here. And you know, maybe you don't choose him as your top pick, but you're going to get a 10-1 that I wouldn't surprise me at all if you know, I would imagine he ends up in the trifecta, right? Like, or the super. It wouldn't surprise me at all if, you know, he finishes second or third in this and is a horse that you could sort of build something around. I like Smooth Lake Stray. I think he makes sense. I can see him winning this. Wouldn't be a shocker. Well, I guess I mean, it would be a shocker to you guys, just not
Yeah,
to me.
it would be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the only way I could see it would be if Beyond Brilliant were to scratch. Then maybe I could see the case for Smooth Like Shirt a little bit, but I don't think he's good enough. As far as Kinross goes, you know, I looked at that horse forever, and I do want to talk about him a little bit. You know, I'm ending up not using him at all because of the post, I think, is really what's kind of scaring me off of that. But there's just a lot of questions with him as far as, does he want 2 turns? Does he even want a mile for that matter? And to me, this is not like a lightly raced horse that has been good or that you would expect rapid improvement from. He was a just okay horse for 17 career starts as a 5-year-old, as a gelding, and then all of a sudden got really good in his last 4. And I tend to think that probably corresponded with catching softer ground in those last 4 starts. I mean, it's not that he can't run over firm, but as the season goes on in Europe, typically you get more rain and you get some heavier going. And I think that improvement corresponds pretty clearly to me with the heavier going that he caught in his last 4 starts, as well as, you know, being in that 6 to 7 furlong range. I think that going to a mile over quicker ground from the 13 post is just a pretty tall order for him.
Yeah, I think to me the post is the biggest scare factor. But yeah, maybe you're right about the softer going. I hadn't actually noticed that there is somewhat of a correlation there. So, fairly wide open affair. Anybody else we want to talk about in here who's maybe an interesting underneath? I mean, I know Dave mentioned domestic spending off the forever and a day layoff. A horse that seems like one you either toss or probably ends up on every one of your tickets if you really trust that horse. I know there's a stat out there. I probably am stealing this from Caleb, but it's something about Chad Brown off 270 day or more layoffs is 3 for 3 in graded stakes. So Caleb, I do listen to pods you're on. And so, I mean, that's a pretty gaudy stat for domestic spending. You know, obviously layoff is a concern, but you know, his races prior are, you know, yeah, he belongs here.
Post is awful tough for him.
Yeah, it is.
But he's a wild card for sure. The biggest wild card of both days of Breeders' Cup, I would say, is domestic spending. I think we probably need to talk about Annapolis a little bit. He's probably the most likely of the Americans to pull off the win here, I would say. And I would assume he's probably going to be a hell of a lot shorter than 10-1 in the betting. I would not be surprised to see him go off at about second choice, maybe in that 7-2 range, maybe third choice. But 10-1 is not going to happen.
Yeah,
he's done nothing wrong, right? Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, he was my second choice in here for sure.
Yeah, I mean, he has nothing wrong. I mean, the only loss he had was when he tried to go a little bit too far and ran to Nation's Pride, who's likely going to be your favorite in the Breeders' Cup turf. And then he caught a very swampy turf course at Penn National, which you can't really even take much out of that race. But yeah, I mean, he fits in here. He would be, you know, one of the few I think that could win and beat Modern Games, but I'm probably of the opinion that Modern Games is just good enough that it's not going to really matter. But if you don't think that highly of Modern Games, then I would probably say you need to use Annapolis. What else do we have?
I would say Regal Glory would be the other horse that was sort of a little bit interesting to me in here. Regal Glory is, you know, again, one of those horses, you know, Chad Brown barn, and just a horse that likes to win and definitely likes to, you know, hit the board. You're talking a horse that's 18 of 21 hitting the board. Now, some of those lesser performances have come at Keeneland, but, you know, a horse that seems interesting, right? Like, you know, it seems to sort of, again, fit in with a sponge. And I realize I'm going to get lit up in chat for that one.
David Aragona likes the horse quite a bit. For me personally, I can maybe forgive one of those last 2 losses, but not both. You're supposed to win at least one of those as the odds-on favorites and even money favorites. It just doesn't seem to have that same kit that she was showing earlier in her career. She's now 6 years old, so she's probably not for me as one of the top betting choices. But if she has races that would win this race, if you can get back to her. Somebody asked who had a comment. I don't want to address this because I actually like this bomb. Nick Feldman, number 2. Cheryl Spate. And I've been on the record multiple times of being aggressively against this horse. So this was the 50-1 morning line horse that went off like 9-1 and won the Maker's Mark Mile at Keeneland earlier this year. And that's a large part of the reason why I like this horse in this spot, is that the race of his career came at this trip and at this track. After that, connections got kind of dumb, and they put him in spots that didn't really make sense. The Churchill race, 1 1/8, is maybe a little too far, and that Churchill turf is very wonky, as we all know. For God knows what reason, they tried the dirt next time. Then they put him 7 furlongs behind a very slow pace, which is too short, and he just never had a chance from there. And then last time, he was never beating Modern Games, but he did get fouled a little bit by Modern Games coming into the turn, where he had to steady, kind of drop back to almost last, and still put in a nice rally to get up for 4th. He was beaten 7 lengths, but that's not quite as bad when you realize that Modern Games is 5 lengths ahead of everybody else. So really, he was only 2 lengths back from the rest of the second place finisher there after having a little bit of trouble. I think getting back to Keeneland makes this horse interesting. Sias gets back up, who was on for one of his wins. And I don't know this horse can win. I really don't think this horse can win. But I think this horse could hit the try at a price that's probably 40 or 50-1. So, yeah, that's one that I'd probably key underneath. So I'm with you, Nick. I think that horse is sneaky.
Cool. I like it. Let's hop on to the Distaff, the old Friday race that got moved to Saturday. I know we were chatting in one of our pre-meetings for this, or pre-conversations for this stream, and I think it came up the fact that the sort of older turf marathon division has turned into the world of who beats who today, and this race sort of is feeling like that. Again, it seems like you have Malathon in here, you have Clairiere, you have Nest, you have Search Results. A lot of these have run versus each other numerous times. To me, this was one of the shortest fields on the day, but I think this is, with the dirt mile, probably was the hardest race for me to handicap, and the fact that I don't necessarily know who steps up and wins it today. I did land on a top choice in here, but I don't know. Let's start with Dave. Let's see, who are you thinking shows up on Saturday?
Yeah, so you mentioned Clairiere and Malathat and Search Results. They always run against each other, and basically only against each other. Their field sizes are tiny. It's like 5-horse fields, and it's always those 3 and a couple others, and they always beat each other. And I'm going for a new face here. I think Society makes the front and just dusts them. The rest of them can play catch up if they want, but I think Society is probably the quickest, and is just going to make the rest of them look silly and be a new name at the front of their small field races. It's kind of a hunch play. Yeah.
You basically took exactly what I was going to say. Society's my top pick in here. I wanted the new fresh face. I think Society is the horse that ends up loose on the lead.
Yeah.
And I've sort of seen everybody else in this field enough times. I don't have anything against Nest. I know Nest probably ends up your favorite. I think Nest has done nothing wrong, but I think Society is the sort of quickly improving type. Last couple have been very impressive, and I think Society just goes to the front, and everybody else might be running for second here.
So yeah, I have Society as probably the second biggest unknown for me after Domestic Spending. I don't know what to do with the horse. Honestly, I don't. The last 2 races were outstanding, and they do fit in this field. They also came at Parks in Charlestown, and places that I generally distrust the figures from, especially the Charlestown race, where there was just really nothing in that field. The Parks race was very good. I think she probably did take advantage of what appeared to be a bit of a speed bias that day, and she was just so loose that the race was over. I don't know what to do. I agree with you guys. She probably gets loose here, but the only race that she has against what I would consider like legitimate competition, she had a bad break and ran 4th in the CCA Oaks. I know she won the Cotillion, but that was not the strongest running of the Cotillion. Morning Macho ran 2nd, for God's sakes, and then Secret Oath came 3rd, and we can tell how bad she needs a break. So yeah, I don't know what to do with Society. What I will say is that I know I am using Clairiere. I love Clairiere in this race. I don't care that there's no pace. I think Clairiere is the best horse in the race, and I'm completely throwing out the last race. She was acting up in the gate. She was really fractious the entire time. She reared up, banged her head off the gate, and then scraped her tongue, and then immediately afterward, the gate pretty much popped. that race is a total throwout. She was not herself, and I'm not paying attention to that. In the 2 previous races, she beat Malafat despite having worse trips than Malafat in probably both of those races. So for me, I think Clairiere is better than Malafat, but she is not going to get bet like Malafat will because of that last race. So for me, I love Clairiere. You probably get 6-1 on her, 5-1 in this field. I think you get better than 4-1. So I think she's just the horse I'm probably the most interested in because I think that she improved more as a 4-year-old than Malafat did. At 3, Malafat was a better horse, but at 4, I think Clairiere has taken that step forward. And I don't think that Malafat really has. Malafat actually won't be on any of my tickets. I will use Clairiere. I'm going to use Blue Stripe as a bomb on a couple of tickets. And I'm going to use Nest and, call me a defensive B coward, but I can't make an argument to not use Nest other than the fact that she hasn't beaten the greatest fields of fillies, but her numbers are too good to not use. But I like Clairiere too much to single. So that's kind of where it landed me. I'll have some combination of Nest, Clairiere, and Blue Stripe as my 3 picks here, with Society kind of being that unknown that I haven't quite decided what I'll do with yet.
Yeah, I'll tell you the truth, Caleb. But you were mentioning Blue Stripe as a price. I have heard I think that's the second most hyped horse I've heard on works in physical form. Going into the Breeders' Cup. This is the horse everybody's talking about. Oh my God, she looks amazing in the morning. She looks like she's really rounding into a huge race. Looks like poised for a huge effort, sort of a thing. I don't know if she's good enough to win the race, but I do like her. Sort of underneath. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how much I want to dig into here. Again, I had a really, really hard time with this race. I know Caleb's completely tossing Malthat. I thought Malthat. Malthat does really like this Keeneland surface. This is the trip, and it's also one of those things where I feel like if I toss one of the, a Malthot or a Clairiere, the horse beats me. I feel like an idiot because, okay, they take turns beating each other, and it was just that horse's day. I hate playing that way. It's an amazingly defensive way to play. But it's one of those things in a Breeders' Cup. Do you just sort of effectively buy this race, kind of A/B buy it, so you get live to other things where you have better opinions? I hate that strategy. And it probably ends up where I end up approaching this just due to this specific race. I end up playing this late pick 5 very sort of differently than I would really like to. So it was a rough race for me. Honestly, probably I spent more time handicapping this race than almost every other race on the card combined. It was just it was brutal, and I still don't know if I have a great opinion.
It's the hardest race, I think, to handicap. I mean, I can make a case for everybody except for Awake at Midnight and probably Secret Oath. I mean, anybody else would not really surprise me. I'm not going to use them all, but if they won, I wouldn't be surprised. It's a very, very tough race.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think those are the two that those were probably the two that I was not as interested in using as well, Caleb. So
yeah, there's a little bit of love for search results in the chat. What do you think of her?
I don't know. She's very much your every other type. This trip seems okay for her. I don't know necessarily if maybe she really wants more of a mile. This might be a little bit longer than she really wants to go. But I think Society goes to the front end. Search results kind of sticks to her hip. She's going to have first run. It's going to be interesting to see kind of how Flavien, places her here and what they inherently do. I would imagine Society is going to try to go and cross over. And how close does he want to keep search results? Again, it's a horse that would not be a shocker, but she's also not one that I really love in this spot either. If it gets saucy up front and they get going a little quick, there are other horses I'm more interested in. I don't know how search results works a trip that is really advantageous to her run style.
I agree. To me, I just thought last time was the time she should have won. 3 back in the Ogden Phipps. Yeah, she went with Latruska. They went nuclear. She got caught. Okay, I'll give you a pass. She won the Molly Pitcher as she was supposed to. But then last time, she kind of knew Latruska was going to come back to her after the previous time they faced off. She kind of let Latruska go a little bit more, blew by her in the turn, and then still got ran down by Malafat. To me, if you couldn't get it done with that setup, I think that's a very similar setup she's going to get today. And she already got caught once. I don't know how she reverses that today.
Yeah, it just seems like, you want to see a little more out of her from other races, and I just don't know. I don't know how she sort of inherits the trip that gets it done here. Cool. So let's so the 1.5 mile Breeders' Cup Turf for $4 million. Where is she here?
Number 2.
They've already known.
Oops, my bad. Sorry, my bad. Oh, I was on the wrong race. That's why I didn't get right there. Dave, talk to me about your girl.
Oh man, I should really recuse myself from this conversation because I'm such a homer for this horse, man. I love Warlike Goddess. I've been watching her since her first run. She captured me early, and I've been annoying people on Discord about her for 12 races now. She's spectacular. She's visually impressive. She wins by how much she wants to win. She always finds another gear, except for when they keep her too far back, or go too early. In last year's Breeders' Cup, she's not perfect. She's not flawless. I don't even know if she's very likely to win this race. I love her in here, but I'm jaded. I take my recommendation with a huge grain of salt. This is my favorite horse running. She's my girl. So I'd love it if she won, and I'm prepared for if she doesn't, because I got brutalized last Breeders' Cup by a Japanese invader and an early middle move. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. I can't fault you for going back to Warlike Goddess. Honestly, I think, we're used to this Breeders' Cup turf being dominated by the Euros. This tends to be the big name Euros ship in. There's a couple of monsters, and those horses just really dominate this field. I don't necessarily think this is that kind of a year. I think the contingent that came over this year is a little bit softer than what we historically have seen. I don't see a Broom in here, or those types of horses that just are absolute monsters. And I think Warlike Goddess is very, very, very interesting in this spot. Now, she's reunited with Joel Rosario. I don't necessarily know if I like that. I was sitting with a very good friend of mine, top of the stretch at Saratoga, and I used every single swear word that is in the English dictionary in about a 10-second time frame as I'm watching the top of the stretch, going, like, just because you're sitting there going, what is this moron doing? Like,
I did the same thing with
Peru
and French at the Breeders' Cup. Yeah, it's
that was the most bonehead ride in the Flower Bowl that I have ever seen a world-class jockey make. That was absolutely just abysmally bad.
Yep.
Especially given when he knew what he was, knew what he was running versus, and somebody got way too cocky for what they could get away with. And so, I do really like Warlike Goddess here. I can't beat you up on that. I think your morning line favorite will end up being Rebels Romance. Another hard horse to fault. Charlie Appleby has been saying that Rebels Romance is ready to fire a really huge effort. Everybody on the clock reports is saying this horse just looks like a freak and looks phenomenal. So I think Rebels Romance makes a ton of sense here. I don't think I'm surprising anybody there on the campaign that Rebels Romance has had. And the other horse I'm interested in, and I know Caleb is gonna hate on me for being into, is Mishriff. I realized that arc was just absolutely too just too bad to be true. He has run some absolutely monstrous races. Doesn't necessarily like to get it done. Doesn't necessarily like to get his photo taken. Probably a little bit camera shy. But I think Mishriff, especially given the fact that I think this is a slightly weaker Euro contingent, this is not the monsters that we're normally used to seeing. Mishriff makes a lot of sense here. And if I get somewhere around 6-1, I will be more than happy to be very aggressive through Mishriff.
Wow, 6-1.
That's what morning line is. And I mean, Mishriff is that horse we always kept waiting. He's won 15 million in his career. He's won everything that can be done, but he did most of that in his 4-year-old season. He's not been the same horse in his 5-year-old season. I'll make 100% agree, but this would be one hell of a capstone to his career.
Yeah, so I agree with sort of with both of you guys, actually. I mean, first off, I'm Team Dave. Warlike Goddess, straight to the hoop. I'm all in. I think she just fits in here, and it's not just because I like the horse. Maybe not because Dave likes the horse, but I do. I've always thought she was an awesome mare. But she is by far the best of the Americans in here, and probably the only American that I would say has a chance to win. But similar to Mark's point, every couple of years the Europeans really send a couple of horses that are, I would say, more than a cut below, and the Americans manage to steal one. I feel like this could be that year. I'm not afraid of really any of the Europeans that are coming over. Rebels Romance. I don't like this horse at all. He won't be on any of my tickets. I know Mark kind of likes him, and his record on turf is nice, but I'm just not convinced that the fields in Germany he's been beating are really all that good. I mean, the Hoppergarten race I didn't think was that impressive. He kind of looks more like a lugging grinder plotter.
He's a plotter. He's a plotter. Yeah.
He doesn't really have much turn of foot, and I don't know how well it's going to translate to Keeneland surface here. So he's not really for me. Of the two Applebees, I would prefer Nation's Pride, who's really shown an aptitude for running over this kind of a surface at this trip. He had some bad luck in that first race stateside where he had a very bad trip behind a very slow pace. But in his next two, he really stamped off that he is the horse to beat as far as the 3-year-old turf division goes. But the waters are certainly deeper here. So I don't think he's exactly scaring anybody off at the same time. And I would even go as far to agree with Mark a little bit about Mishrif. And I think I dumped on this horse earlier this week. But I've heard enough people who I respect say that this horse could be live that I kind of gave him another look. And I don't know that I see it, but he's probably the third biggest wild card of the weekend. So we've now covered the third biggest unknowns between Domestic Spending Society and Mishrif, who he needs firm ground. He hates soft going. You can kind of tell looking at his lines. So I think you can forgive some of those. My question with him is that I really think he's much better at 1.25 miles as opposed to 1.5 miles. I think this really tests his stamina, especially from the far outside post if he loses ground. But there are versions of this horse that absolutely win this race, including what he ran earlier this year in the Coral Eclipse, where he was a good second to Vedini, who went on to run second in the Arc. I mean, he was second to Baid in the John Mutt International Stakes. Baid obviously being the best horse in the world over in Europe up until his last race anyway. So yeah, I think there's versions of Mishrif that could win this race, but I just don't know which version is going to show up. And given that I'm not totally enamored with Rebels Romance or Aiden O'Brien runners or whatever else, I'll probably be mostly through Warlike Goddess, a little bit through Nation's Pride, and a little bit through Mishrif. That's probably the only 3 horses I think I need to use.
Wow, you're only going 3 deep in here, huh?
I think if I go more than 3 deep, I would probably need everybody, because I think after that, I truly don't know who could win. I mean, I guess people could argue for Rebels Romance, but I'm not going to include a favorite who I'm lukewarm on as the 4th pick in my ticket. Stone Age, he looks a little bit exposed in his last 2 starts. He couldn't even beat some of our local horses. I know Chase likes the horse, but I kind of struggle to see it. Broom, he's probably the rabbit for Stone Age, even though he didn't rabbit last year and almost won. He's a super inconsistent horse, hard to get a handle on. Channel Maker, I mean, I got the hat. I don't think he's going to win anymore. And then the California horses have just really never been able to be super competitive in this kind of a race. So, I mean, I don't know. After those 3, I think it's wide open, but I really think those 3 get you through this race 80% of the time.
Yeah, I don't hate that take at all. I think it's, probably 80% of the time. And does it actually make sense to spread? So what you're saying, Caleb, is that you're going to be live in a pick 6. You're going to leave Rebels Romance off and you would have hit it. But for the favorite, this is where we're going here.
Well, I get the feeling Nation's Pride probably goes off as the favorite, but yes, that's what we're saying.
You think so?
Really?
You think he does? Okay.
I mean, Buick has choice, ends up on Nation's Pride. Nation's Pride has the local form. People are going to be a little distrusting of the German form coming over. They both probably go off 1-2 or 1-3 maybe if Warlike Goddess takes a bunch of local money. But I think Nation's Pride probably goes off as your favorite.
Okay, cool. No, I preferred it the other way, but no, I respect that.
You'll get a better price.
Exactly. All that Caleb money, not screwing the pools up.
That's right.
Okay. Anybody else?
Did you think anybody else you wanted to talk about? I mean, you seem to think this race needs a little more open.
No. I was going to say No, obviously, I really didn't.
I know Dave has nobody else.
Yeah, I know.
Dave has
Dave's
eyes
gonna
for
be
one
ice cold
horse.
singled in here. Dave just a one horse fan, and that's why
It's
we started
just
with him.
money. It's only money.
No, I think we covered all of the horses that I found to be interesting in here. The only one that we didn't really talk about was Stone Age, who I want a tiny amount of money going through Stone Age. I don't know if this is the distance or if he really wants a little bit. She might be the one that I scream, is distance compromised. But you're getting Ryan Moore up, and a horse that has shown flashes shown some flashes of brilliance, although the last few have sort of been head scratching. So C type for me, and a horse that I would be really upset if Stone Age goes off at 30-1 and beats me, and I feel like a moron. So cool. Well, on to the I was gonna say the big one, but I don't feel like it's the big one anymore because we get so many good Euros in the turf. So I don't know. Let's start off with this question: how does Flightline lose? What happens in this race where the morning line of 3-5 is a massive overlay, which is something you don't often say? The probably 1-4, 1-5 Flightline. How does he lose in here?
Josh is just vigorously trying to call in to answer that question, I'm sure.
I wanted him here because
Yes.
I know he is
Josh
the
is
one person I know.
He's the only person I know.
He is so against Flightline.
I think
I don't think
a meteor hits Kentucky. I mean, I honestly don't know. It's a lock. This horse wins.
Flightline's Pacific Classic was the best race I've ever seen in my life. It's from a performance standpoint. Maybe not the most exciting, but from a just raw, brilliant performance standpoint, it's the greatest race I've ever seen. Better than Arrogate's race overseas. I mean, it's just phenomenal what he did. And I don't see how he can lose. I do not see how his horse can lose. And it's horse racing. Anything can happen, right? But I can't see it.
Generational horse.
I
forget about it.
Yeah, I mean, I know people have talked about best horse since Ghost Zapper as far as, from a raw speed figure, scary big numbers horse. It was amazing because I saw that last race, and I watched it and I didn't really realize what the figures came back, and then I hopped into Timeform, and the Timeform figure came back a 151. I don't think I've ever seen a 140 in Timeform. I mean, 130s are rarefied air.
Yes.
And this horse ran in the 150s. Like that's just absolutely absurd. I know Sheets gave that race a some sort of absurd negative $1 million or something. But it was just some absolutely insane race. My thing with Flightline has always been it's a horse we see so infrequently. He's so he's been so carefully campaigned. He did win the Met Mile, did so very well. So obviously his game does travel. I don't know if there are fragility concerns, if he's a horse that just really requires an epically long amount of time off between starts. But he's a really hard horse to get around on this spot. I mean, I think he's probably one of the most sure things I've ever seen in horse racing. But I said that with Rachel Alexandra in the, the race she lost at Saratoga. So, occasionally we get these wrong. How do you approach this from, a handicapping standpoint? Do you just single Flightline and move on? Do you try to create value elsewhere? What's the approach here?
It depends what you're playing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, are you playing pick fives? Are you playing exact? I mean, if you like Flightline, you can't really win bet him unless you want to save a $2 ticket and put it on your refrigerator. But there's no value in a win bet there. So I think from a single race perspective, you look to hammer an exacta and treat it like a win bet. You pick whoever you think's run second and just crush it, or a trifecta, or whatever your jam is. For a horizontal, I think you single this horse and you move on. I think you can't be afraid to lose, right? And in the 3% chance this horse gets beat, you have to just be okay with getting beat, I think. I mean, any of his last 4 races is better than anything that anyone has ever run, with the exception of one of Life is Good's races, which is just as fast. And this is a distance that I think we all sort of recognize Life is Good is probably going to have some trouble with.
Yeah.
We've also never seen Flatlines third, fourth, fifth gears. I mean, that like the horse was fractionally close to setting a course record last out, geared down 19 lengths ahead of the second place. Like, we haven't seen the best. We have no idea how fast this horse could possibly be. So, yeah.
So Dave, a wise man, actually like 30 or 45 minutes ago in the stream, said that, it's a big day and this Bob Baffert guy wins big races. And and then that happens and the horse goes off at 8 or 10 to 1. And we all go, oh, why didn't we bet the Baffert at a price? Any love for Taiba in the spot? I mean, I realize Taiba is like the other Baffert at different points in his career, but seems to be in pretty good form.
No, I think the two most likely second place horses are Epicenter and Olympiad. Taiba is sort of a mystery. And I watched Taiba win whatever that prep race was to get into it was a San Diego Derby, I guess, probably to get into the Kentucky Derby. Visually didn't look fast. Like in person, the horse ran past everybody, but it was just like, oh, okay, that was an okay race. I mean, I don't really get the love for Taiba. I don't really understand the horse that much. It's probably going to be the greatest 4-year-old ever, but I'm probably talking it into the winner's circle. But I thought the 6 and the 7 were the two most interesting second place horses here. But in terms of betting this race, everything's going to flow through Flightline. It's like Caleb said, it's not even worth a hedge bet against.
Yeah, I think I agree with Dave. To me, I think this is one of those races where I'm not a vertical player very much, but I think you have to recognize that the second most likely horse to win is probably not the second most likely horse to run second, or the most likely horse to run second, excuse me. I would say, there's probably a strong argument that Life is Good is maybe the second most likely horse to win this race. In the event that the track plays to speed, gold rail, he gets loose, whatever happens, maybe he just hates off tracks and doesn't have distance issues, whatever. In my opinion, he's the second likeliest winner, but he's not the most likely horse to run second. So I'm not going to have a Life is Good or a Flightline over Life is Good Exacta, because I think that if he gets past, it's probably because he's dropping anchor and he's likely to fall out the back of the race. So if that's what happens, then I actually do like Taiba. I guess I'm a little different than Dave there. This was a horse that was extremely fast in the San Diego Derby. Didn't handle the Kentucky Derby, as I didn't think he would, too soon. But it's kind of gotten back to that fast number pretty quick in just 2 starts. I think he's sitting on a forward move. I guess the concern with him is that allegedly he hates kickback and he drew the rail. So not a great place to be. But if they can work out a trip, and who better to get 8 wide in a 6-horse field than Mike Smith? So yeah, I think he's a very likely horse to run second. And obviously Epicenter is the one who I think can run second as well.
So you're saying
horizontals, it's a dead single. Go ahead.
So you're saying that the generational talent can't win the Breeders' Cup Classic?
I think he's the second likeliest winner of the Breeders' Cup Classic. I just think Flightline breathes different air than the rest of these horses. Well, I don't know what's more than a generational, but that is what Flightline is.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, and I do tend to agree with you guys. It's hard horizontally. It's one of those situations where there's the devil on both shoulders. They're sitting one side's going, oh well, you just single Flightline in your pick 5 or your pick 6, and you take the free square. And the other side is going, but if you can beat Flightline, you hit something that you go move and buy an island in the South Pacific. Because everything is going to pay absolutely absurd to anybody else in this field. So, it's a hard race. I honestly wish it was a little more competitive on paper. It's a little bit frustrating that I think 2 years in a row we're going to have a classic with probably a runaway winner, which is a little bit frustrating. I know I was watching some DRF has been putting up historical Breeders' Cup Classic clips, and watching these 5 and 6 wide blanket finishes is pretty cool. And wish we could get one of those these days. That'd be really fun. But don't know if it really happens this year. So Caleb, where can the people find you? I think we're gonna end this up a little bit early. Where can they find you this weekend?
well, you can find me on track. So me and, well, allegedly Josh are going to be at the Breeders' Cup, although that still remains to be seen if he plans on showing up. But he's still sitting in traffic, unfortunately, that poor soul. But yeah, so I'll be at the track tomorrow and Saturday. So if you're going to be there, hit me up on Twitter or on Discord, and we'll definitely make sure to meet up. If you're not going to be there, you can still obviously chat me in the Discord or at my Twitter handle. You can see it at Keeneland WVU, and let's make some money.
So Dave, I know you had swore off betting on horse races for the rest of the year, and then somebody mentioned that we're like Goddess is running. I'm sorry, and you suddenly decided that you're going to play the Breeders' Cup. So
yeah. I picked the wrong weekend. There's a Santa Anita mandatory pick 6 on Sunday. We're like Goddess is running on Saturday. Okay, I guess we'll wait one more weekend to retire. Yeah, I'm gonna be watching this from home here in California, and then I'll be probably at Santa Anita on Sunday for the closing day, and try to hit the pick 6 Mando.
Cool. I will be stabbing away. There's a number of high roller tournaments on horse tourneys, so I will be firing at a few of those, and I'll be around Discord. So hit me up. I debated a last minute trip to Kentucky, but I would have been in the passenger seat of Josh's new car, stuck in traffic right now, and Caleb would be doing the show solo because I was going to have him pick me up in Chicago, and drive down with him. So I apparently made the right decision for once. But no, Dave, honestly, thank you so much for hopping on last minute. It means all the world to us. I really appreciate all your insight and all the information you bring to us. For anybody who's in chat right now, I know we were going to give away some merch. Josh had something planned. I'm not smart enough to come up with something on the fly for how to give it away. So we will either maybe do a Twitter contest, maybe we'll do something in Discord, do some other sort of promo. If you like our content, please like and subscribe to the channel. It means a ton. We were trying to get to 1K for Breeders' Cup weekend, and we are so close. But as Alex says, we will have to I will have to bring Dave back when he's done with his hiatus. He makes me feel good because I'm not the one with least hair on stream. I mean, it's great. So. But no, guys, thank you all so much. And let me see if I can actually figure out how to get an outro going here. Cool. So thank you everybody for tuning in, and good luck at the races.
Good luck, everybody.